Recording in progress.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the January 15th, 2025 joint special meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Charter Revision Commission. I'm First Selectman Colin Mall, and I call this meeting to order. Everyone would stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this point, I will open up the room to public comment for any comments pertaining to the agenda items tonight.
Thank you. Annie Hornish, 864 Thrall Avenue. I've said this before in the other charter revision comments, but since this is another meeting, I just wanted to get that out briefly. I support keeping all the positions elected. I just think it's better government, better accountability in government, and I explained that before. Also, I just want to make a comment about having the town attorney send letters out on behalf of the tax collector. I think that's kind of a waste of taxpayer dollars. And it's also could be perceived as a form of intimidation because if someone receiving a letter from the town attorney, it looks like a lawsuit. So I think it's best if it comes directly from the tax collector. No one would be surprised it's in the title of the job. That's what that person does for her role, or his role. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room? All right, is there public comment on Zoom? Any public comment on Zoom? All right, moving on. Item number 3 is discussion on charter revision recommendations. So we have Chairman Eric Remington of the Charter Revision Commission here to share the recommendation. The Board of Selectmen reviewed your recommendation. We asked you to take a look and reconsider all 3 positions. Under the understanding, you guys had a meeting last week, and give you the floor and you can let us know what your thoughts were from there.
Okay, thank you. And I know 3 of the 4 other members are online, so I invite them to jump in at any point. So we did have a meeting to discuss the referral back to us, and we did discuss it. And the consensus of the group was to maintain the original recommendation, which was to recommend that the treasurer be changed to an elected position, the town clerk and the tax collector the treasurer become an appointed position, and the town clerk and the tax collector remain appointed positions. So I know, I did listen to your meeting, and I know there were some concerns. So, we thought it was appropriate for us to come back and to more thoroughly explain our rationale and how we ended up with that. So I know, one of the things that was discussed was that a lot of the arguments we made for the treasurer being changed could hold true for the town clerk and tax collector. So I just put together some of the things that we learned as part of the process that made us recommend the change in the treasurer. So if you look at the treasurer position, it's evolved significantly over time, where while all positions evolve, the town clerk and tax collector have not had the same level of evolution that the treasurer's had. So just some of those things that have changed. The treasurer historically was a part-time position with a small stipend, and it's really evolved into a role with daily responsibilities. I have an audit background, and the treasurer role presents a number of concerns for me with my audit hat on from a control standpoint that the other 2 positions don't present. The treasurer has significant access to literally tens of millions of dollars of funds in the town's bank accounts, literally through the push of a button. The town clerk and tax collector do not have that access. Moving the treasurer duties into the finance office, one gives you more people that can perform some of those responsibilities. It also gives you the opportunity for more segregation of duties from a control perspective. So it strengthens the controls. I know one of the comments was that the tax collector has access to funds, but it's very different in our mind. There are very tight controls and segregation of duties with the tax collector. So the tax collector collects funds, but has no ability to access those funds. So they're only depositing those funds into the bank account. The tax collector's office has no ability to withdraw funds from the accounts. And there are very tight controls that balancing is done daily, and that's done and reviewed outside of the tax collector's office and the finance office. The other thing is that in just a few years, towns capitalized on our strong cash flow, so we've greatly increased the amount of interest income we generate. So just a few years ago, it was $100,000 a year in interest income we generate. Last year, I think it was $1.8 million in interest income. And that requires literally daily cash management. That's largely the responsibility of the treasurer. So, just more reason that we thought it should change. And, having been in the office, there's still opportunity for additional cash management and even greater interest income. So I think having a more dedicated, not that the treasurer's not dedicated, but an employee, would have more opportunity and could work more collaboratively with the finance office to try to generate even more float and get more money invested in working for the town. I don't have the exact number, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of, at any point in time, we've got $50 million in cash, which usually is towards the beginning of July after we've done the tax collection for the first half of the year. So it's significant that the amount that the treasurer is responsible for and has access to. In addition, we've got an investment portfolio of $65 million between the pension, OPEB, the capital expenditure fund, and that's largely the responsibility of the treasurer. I mean, there's oversight from the Board of Finance and the Retirement Commission on that, but the day-to-day responsibility lies with the treasurer there. So all of this, increase in responsibilities really transformed the role. So that's why we felt it was prudent to make the recommendation to move the treasurer to be appointed. And like I said in the beginning, that there have been changes. Everybody's job changes every day, but we just didn't see the level of evolution in the town clerk and the tax collector. The other thing I would say is that we held a lot of meetings, did a lot of research. I would say that nobody really came to us and made a compelling case to change the town clerk and the tax collector. I think the first selectman and maybe one other citizen were the only two that advocated a change. And I think the citizen who recommended the change said that even if we changed it, it should still have a residency requirement for those two positions. Just some of the other items that we talked about, independence from elected officials was one of the bullet points we had on our list. And I think the thought process there is that these are roles that have heavy statutory responsibility and duties, and as an elected official, they're free to fulfill those responsibilities without interference from other elected officials or others who are trying to influence them. Where as an employee, they would have less freedom to perform those statutory duties.
Could you explain that further? Like what you mean by if they were an employee, they wouldn't have that ability to perform their statutory responsibilities?
So if they were an employee, their direct supervisor could tell them to do something that perhaps could go against the statutory responsibilities, or something that they didn't feel was right. Whereas as an elected official, they have the power to do, to follow the statute as opposed to what they're directed to do, which may or may not be correct.
Okay, all right. So in the same vein, couldn't they just not do it even if they were elected, decide not to do it?
They could,
Yeah.
but then they'd be in violation of their statutory duties.
What would the punishment or recourse be if they didn't do it?
Well, ultimately, it could be not being reelected. Yeah, there could be legal entanglements with the Attorney General or whoever, depending on what it was they were doing. Yeah, there's no perfect answer to any of this. I would say that we can get, as long as we're electing people to any position, we're going to get good ones and bad ones. And that's the risk you run when you have elected people, whether it's on a board or commission, tax collector, town clerk, first selectman, whoever. As long as we're electing people to positions, you run the risk that you're going to get somebody who doesn't do a good job. It's just, in our form of government, I think it's the risk you take.
All right, thanks.
And the other thing we talked about was, that in our opinion, you get a higher level of service from a resident as opposed to an employee. And I think the thought process there was that as an elected official, they have a greater degree of ownership. They're not just an employee, but they're more vested in the role. So we thought that was something that we have in the people that have served in those roles. We've had that for a long time, and we thought that was something that was important to continue in the near term. So I know there was some discussion about the tax collector position and some concerns about collections, which I think was directed at us, and we were asked to listen to that. So, this is, we looked at that as part of our evaluation. We looked at the data, and since then I've done some more research personally, and I think some of the comments that were made at that meeting were, they were unfair and a bit misleading. I think at least 5 times it was mentioned that we only collect 98.5% of our taxes, and that's just not true. Last year we collected over 99%. The 98.5% is the rate that the Board of Finance uses in the budget to estimate what our revenue is going to be. They say that we'll collect 98.5. Last year I think we collected 99.1 in the current year. And if you look at what we collect over time that's within the control of the tax collector, we eventually collect virtually everything related to real estate where we can lien the property. There are some things on the list that we don't collect, but those are really out of the hands of the tax collector. And I think it was mentioned that there's the HOAs that are problematic, and that is something that I think really needs some work to try to solve that problem. But we include that on the list, but we're never going to collect those. So just by virtue of that, you're never going to get to 100% collections, because you're putting these tax bills out there that there is literally no entity to collect the tax from. And there's also a couple of problematic properties that have complex legal issues beyond the control of the tax collector that she inherited when she came in, that really could use some effort and outside help to clean those up. Again, that right now you're not going to collect those. And I know there was some discussion that there's $1 million in outstanding taxes that's uncollected. I think the number was actually 966,000, and that's a shocking number and a big headline number. But I think when you parse it out, the actual number that we should be concerned about is much smaller. The first thing is that 607,000 of that 966,000 is 2 years or newer, and virtually all of that gets collected relatively quickly as taxpayers get caught up. It just historically it just comes in. There's there's notices that go out and things like that, and people eventually just pay that. And then you have another 114,000 that relates to the HOAs that I talked about of that 966, and then there's 112,000 that relates to those other two complex properties. So when you parse it all out and you look at that 15-year period that makes up the $966,000, there's about $132,000 remaining that remains uncollected, and that almost all of that never drops off. That ultimately we collect that money. And while I don't think it should necessarily be, we shouldn't wait to collect our money. We don't lose out when we don't collect it, because as a bonus we get paid 18% interest while we wait. So if you think about it, if we waited 15 years to collect $1 in tax, we're actually going to collect $3.70 in tax. So 3.7 times the original tax is what we'll collect if we wait that long. And again, I'm not saying we should wait, but there is a significant penalty to taxpayers for not paying. And I think so. If you look at over the 15-year period that's on that list that makes up the $966,000, the total levy was $552 million, and so we're talking about $132,000 out of $552 million. That is really the amount that we should focus on. So if you extrapolate that out, that would be a collection rate of 99.98%. The other thing I would point out is that last year the general fund generated a surplus of $2.7 million. 1.1 million, or 41% of that, was the result of the tax collector collecting $1.1 million over what was budgeted by the Board of Finance. And the other thing I know from personal experience with the current tax collector is that her predecessors would take months sometimes to cash checks. That the checks would come in July. They kind of needed something to do the rest of the year, so they'd kind of wait to just over time deposit those checks. Now every payment that comes in is deposited that day and batched out to the penny. And I can fully appreciate that. New people come in and they look at things differently, and so we for a long time have had this philosophy as a community that we're going to take a less aggressive approach to tax collection. That we try to avoid foreclosing, taking people's houses, that kind of thing, and that's not new. The tax collector's been very transparent with First Selectmen, with the Board of Finance, and we absolutely pursue collections, but we do give people time to work things out without having to foreclose. Doesn't mean we wouldn't do it if it came to it and we had to, but it's really always, the policy's always been that that's a last resort. But I would say, it's reasonable to assume that, when the players change, that, you get a new First Selectman, new Board of Selectmen, new Board of Finance, whoever, you might want to look at that and say, is that still what we want to do? I think there's valid arguments in some cases for trying to collect the money sooner. So I think that's certainly a valid discussion if that wanted to be had. And that would be a collaborative process with the tax collector, the First Selectman, the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and that's a discussion we could have tomorrow, and doesn't necessarily require a charter change. So. So that's kind of the thought process that we had, and I guess I would open it up to the other members to see if they had any comments that they wanted to add.
Yeah, hi, Ray Dalrymple here. I guess my question is there a by the Board of Selectmen, is there a perceived problem that we have in collecting past due taxes? Or is there a real problem in collecting our past due taxes and we need a more robust collection process? Or perhaps the Board of Selectmen just don't understand the process well enough to have a comfort level that we are collecting our taxes on a very good percentage of overall, on our overall tax base. I guess secondly, with these numbers that I've reviewed, I would believe, and I don't know this, but I would believe that we would stack up very well with percentage of taxes collected to our surrounding towns or like towns in our demographic. I don't know that for sure, but I'd like to see that. So I also have a comment. If the tax collector position was appointed versus elected, I guess what perhaps would have been done differently in the process to collect taxes? Would we be assured that there would be a more robust process to collect past due taxes? I'm not sure that would have happened. So I think if there's just a perceived problem with the tax collector, that's one issue. But if there's just not a full understanding or a comfort level of the process by the Board of Selectmen on how we collect our taxes and what kind of process we have to collect past due taxes, I'm not sure which one is the issue.
I'm happy to answer that for you. So you had mentioned a policy of not going after, foreclosing on homes, so I've never seen that policy. Where is that policy?
Well, it's not a written policy, it's just
Okay.
a practice
All right,
that's
it's a
been
practice.
developed over time.
Okay.
And it's not an absolute prohibition, it's just normally the process works itself out that it doesn't get to the point where we need to do that.
Right, so just to clarify, it's a practice. There's nothing written on it. So the perception that you're talking about, Ray, isn't a perception. It's, and I don't think it's even an issue. It's, and a resident said it before this, that the job duty of the tax collector is to collect the past due taxes. And so when we ask for them to take the necessary steps to collect all the taxes, and we're told that it just won't be done, that's how the town attorney got that job duty, because we had no other choice except to have the town attorney do it. So it's not a perception, it's reality. So by this board, it's not a perception of the board. It's me reporting to the board what we're doing based off of facts.
But who determines the necessary steps?
Well, that's where we needed the tax collector to help us with the steps. And unfortunately, we just didn't get that, so I turned it over to the town attorney to help us based off of his experience with other towns doing it. So I don't know if that helps clarify the perception part for you, Ray.
No, it does. It does exactly. Thank you.
We don't want to have to pay the town attorney $130 an hour to write all these letters and get the information, but that's what we were left with.
It was just a refusal of that particular duty by the tax collector. We're not gonna perform this collection of past due taxes. We don't have time. We don't have the manpower. What was the excuse to turn over to the town attorney?
That we just won't foreclose on homes. So, that was it. We just won't foreclose, and I guess that's that perceived practice. There is no policy on what we do after people don't pay taxes. And that's where my concern had come in, that well, why should any of us pay our taxes then,
Yeah.
right? You're not gonna do anything, why should it? What happens when we go to collect next year and people realize that there's no repercussion to paying your tax? Until there's a lien put on and you sell your home in 30 years.
Well, it never gets
it
to that
doesn't-
point.
I'm sorry.
I mean, there's no properties that drop off the rolls uncollected because we didn't foreclose. It just doesn't happen. I mean,
I question, like, where did we get those numbers that you had from, what date on, I'm assuming you got it from the tax collector, right?
yeah, I asked for her reports and I went through and I put those together. I don't have them with me, but I can give them to you.
Yeah, just curious on the date though, like when that was printed.
As of December 31st.
Of 24?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I know like, I presented to the board that like a $90,000 debt was collected just very based off of the fact that they were told we're going into potential foreclosure process, right?
Well, I think the tax collector would dispute that she's got ongoing efforts with those taxpayers that may or may not have had anything. Your letter may or may, there's no way to tell why we actually collected the money, whether it was the letter or it was the efforts of the tax collector reaching out to those people.
I only pulled that one from an email she sent to us that actually stated because of saying that. So the only numbers I pulled were from actual statements and emails from the tax collector. But regardless, I mean, that's where we came up with this. And by we, I mean myself, right? Of why I see an issue.
This is Kathy Harrington. I just think it's important to kind of put this out there as well, that at one of our last Board of Selectmen meetings, we did discuss coming up with policy and procedure going forward and inviting the tax collector to come in and discuss with us and help us develop that policy. I just think that's really important that we all have open dialogue and be collaborative. So I just wanted to put that out there too as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Right.
I would say, just based on what I've seen, that's maybe a missing element here, is just that open dialogue and
Mhm.
collaboration.
You see
That I,
Jeremy.
yeah.
Jeremy, you have your?
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just gonna, just share that, yeah, I am in alignment with, everything that Eric has been saying and that kind of thing in terms of what the commission found, what the research we did and sort of the findings and that kind of thing. And we did have a conversation again, and Eric's presenting it very well in terms of, it feels, at least to us at the time, that this was more something related to policy, maybe not position, and that was, as part of the commission, we were trying to look at this from a detached perspective at the position, at the role, not the person, not the policies within those particular areas, and that gets set. So that was all, just sharing alignment.
And I think part of the concern from my perspective, right, is that even though if we were to create policy, you guys actually brought the point up, there's independence from elected officials. So that elected official doesn't actually have to follow any policy, take any directive, which turns out to have been the case anyways, right? By stating to refuse to take anybody's home. So I asked that we do this, and it was just a refusal, which is the independence from elected officials, which is one of your points. And so are we saying that it's okay to not do that job duty? And where's the accountability when they say they don't want to do it? Or they can just do whatever they want because they're an elected official? And even from my job status, I mean, like, I don't report to anybody, I report to my board, but that's based off of what I do. I think I should have to report to somebody based, give me the direction of where we want to go, and that's what I'm going to follow, and that's my job duty. I'm accountable for that, to a council or a board.
Well, but you're not. I mean, you're accountable to the voters.
Correct. 2 years later.
You could not show up for the rest of your term and nothing's gonna happen to you. You're still
That's
gonna get
concerning
paid.
to
Yeah,
me.
Right,
Yeah,
but
which
that's
is
the system we have. So.
And I just don't think, I think that's a flawed system. So, I digress, but are there any other questions or something Charter Revision Commission wants to bring up?
Well, I think the meeting with the tax collector would be very beneficial. I'd love to attend that meeting, because if we have taxes that aren't collected, I mean, Eric knows, and I've been in the private business world forever. I mean, after 30 days, you get a statement. After 60 days, you get another statement. After 90 days of past due account, you call your customer up and you tell them that they're past due, and look, you gotta pay us maybe at over 180 days. You tell them, look, we're not gonna ship you any more darn product until you pay your debt to us, your past due account. They're probably, from all the information that I'm gathering, there was really no robust, distinct timing of what communication goes out to past due tax collectors. What happens after 3 months? What happens after 6 months? What happens after a year? The tax collector that is past due, is in default, should know exactly the steps the town is going to take to collect that bad debt, to collect that past due tax at each step of the way. And if that step gets to a step that includes foreclosure of the house, and that tax collector knows exactly when we're gonna start that process, I think we would have a much better understanding by the taxpayer and understanding by the tax collector and the board of selectmen that the tax collector has to do A, B, C, and D, or we're gonna foreclose that house. And I think if there's a better communication to that taxpayer, I think we do a lot better with some of the past due accounts we have. And I don't, from what I've gathered so far, I am not convinced we have a good process to do that. And from what I'm also hearing, I don't think we have a good willingness to do that. That's why I'd be super excited to attend a meeting with the tax collector.
I'll let you know when we have that meeting.
Does that make any sense to everybody?
Yeah, and I would say if, we can help facilitate that dialogue, we'd be happy to do that, so.
Exactly.
And, I mean, I think that's important that those lines of communication are opened, because, even if we were recommending a change, nothing's gonna happen right away. You've gotta go through the process, and, you'd have to have it approved. I mean, you've got somebody elected in that role that's there until, I think, 2027 or 2028. So, I think it's, no matter what we're gonna do, we need to open those lines of communication to start the change now. Because, the charter is not a mechanism to enact immediate change.
Correct, yeah. I agree with that. Anybody else on Zoom? I mean, I agree with what you guys present, the recommendation, Treasurer. I think it's a good start. Do I think it should be all three? Yes, I still believe that. And do I believe whether the residents voted up or down, it should be up to them, and the point should be presented for all three. But if you guys are recommending just that tonight, I'm on board with that. I do agree. I think you guys did great work getting to that point. I think this board at the time was just saying, we think that your points make the case for all three. And I can understand why you just want to put one up, because there might not be an appetite from the town, and there is concern for that going down. But is somebody that's saying something? No. Mel, did you want to say something?
Of course. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I would go along with the recommendations from the Charter Revision Committee. They certainly have looked into this thoroughly. I appreciate Eric's references to the process with the tax collector. It was a little bit more in depth than I understood, and it sounds like what we're lacking is some procedural stuff has been pointed out. timelines on when things are due. And that's something we can certainly put together. And I would think it would be of comfort to whoever the tax collector is too, to know that after a certain amount of time you do X, and the next step you do Y. So I appreciate all that the Charter Revision Committee's done, and I support their efforts. And thank you for all your work.
Anyone else on this board?
I have one quick question for Eric and the group. The 3 positions that we're discussing, and I just joined the board, but was there an analysis done of our district and surrounding towns of how they approach these positions and how we compare?
That was part of our process,
Okay.
so, yeah, I mean, there's still, a number of towns that have elected officials. I mean, when we looked at the treasurer role, if you look at our surrounding towns and peer group, we're a bit of an outlier that the position is elected.
Okay.
I mean, I think, yeah, I'd say for all positions, the majority of towns have appointed as opposed to elected, but
Okay.
the number of elected for town clerk and tax collector, I think, are still in the 30–40% range. I don't know, do you know?
Thank you.
I can get you that, but, I mean, we did look at that, so.
Okay, thank you.
I think I can also send to Claire the report that you put together from
Oh,
Charter Revision, because
that'd
it
be
has
great.
some of that information, and it
Okay.
just shows you their rationale for each thing, so I'll send that to you too.
Thank you.
Real quick before we end this, I do want to clarify that the tax collector does have a process to which they follow about sending letters out, how often they're going to send the letters out. The issue is that it just doesn't have a finality to it. There is no final step when people refuse to pay. And therein lies the issue. So it's not that there's a lack of process. They've created one. They have one. It's just the last step of it. So.
Yeah. So if we, Ray Dalrymple again, so if we have that meeting with the tax collector, and we collectively, Board of Selectmen and the Charter Review Commission, kind of ask good questions about what the process is, perhaps recommendations to make that process a little bit more technical, a little bit more robust, a little bit more documented, and hopefully after that meeting, everybody has a good understanding that we have this for a process right now. It needs to go to the next level of a process with the timing of the communication and everything. And if those changes aren't made and there's simply a refusal by that department, then we have a problem. And I understand that problem.
All right.
Before we end the meeting, so I don't know if you have anything else, Colin?
I don't.
I don't think there's public comment.
There's no public comment right now, Don.
Can I, this is Don Miner on.
Don, there's no public comment right now. You just muted.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I just wanted, before we ended, I just wanted to, thank the Charter Revision Commission again for the work they did, and I had the pleasure of working with them again. And I wanted to just point out to Jeremy, Ray, and Beth, only because they do not serve in elected positions or not like the finance director for the Board of Education, that you guys did such great work, and I really, again, strongly would recommend that if there are other openings on boards and commissions in town and you're interested, to please put your names in. So I just think like y'all were just great to work with. You were collaborative, you were thorough, you were dedicated, and the town would really benefit if you were interested in serving in another capacity. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathy. I echo those comments. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.